She said, "My drama is part of the package. Get used to it," when I asked for a quiet night. I said, "Okay." So I returned the package to sender. Her parents weren't happy when she and her drama showed up on their doorstep with suitcases. I, 32M, thought I knew what I was getting into when I married her 3 years ago. The warning signs were there during our dating phase. The constant need for attention. The way she'd manufacture problems when things were too peaceful. How she'd escalate minor disagreements into full-blown scenes. But I was young, infatuated, and convinced that love could smooth out those rough edges. How wrong I was. It started small. She'd pick fights about dishes in the sink, then spiral into tears about how I didn't appreciate her. Or she'd create elaborate scenarios where I was supposedly ignoring her, complete with dramatic monologues about feeling unloved. At first, I thought it was just stress from wedding planning, then adjusting to married life. I made excuses, tried to be understanding, walked on eggshells to keep the peace. But peace wasn't something she wanted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. I'd been working 12-hour days on a major project deadline, coming home exhausted and just wanting to decompress. All week, she'd been amping up the drama, complaining that I wasn't giving her enough attention, starting arguments about everything from how I loaded the dishwasher to why I hadn't complimented her new haircut enough times. That Tuesday, I walked through our front door at 9 p.m., completely drained. The house was dark except for the living room, where she sat on the couch with her arms crossed, clearly waiting to pounce. I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat from a furnace. Before I could even set down my briefcase, she launched into her prepared speech. I was neglecting her. I didn't care about our marriage. I was treating her like she didn't matter. The usual script, delivered with Academy Award-worthy emotion. She accused me of being distant, claimed I was probably having an affair, and demanded to know why I couldn't just sit down and talk to her like a real husband. I tried explaining that I was exhausted, that the project would be over in 2 days, that all I wanted was one quiet evening to recharge. Could we please just order takeout, watch something mindless on TV, and have a peaceful night together? That's when she said it. She stood up, hands on her hips, and declared that her drama was part of the package, that this was who she was, and I needed to get used to it. If I wanted quiet nights, I should have married someone boring. She wasn't going to change herself to accommodate my need for peace. This was her, take it or leave it. I looked at her standing there, so proud of her dysfunction, so determined to make chaos the foundation of our relationship. Something inside me just clicked off, like a switch being flipped. I told her okay. She seemed surprised by my calm response. She'd expected me to argue, to plead, to engage with her drama. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, ordered Chinese food for one, and went upstairs to shower. When I came back down, she was still in the living room, now confused by my lack of reaction. That night, while she slept, I started planning. The next day, I took a personal day and began making calls. First to a divorce attorney, who gave me a realistic timeline and advice on protecting my assets. Then to a moving company to get quotes. I opened a new bank account at a different branch and started documenting every dramatic episode she'd put me through over the past 3 years. She wanted her drama to be part of the package? Fine, but I was returning the package to sender. It took me 2 weeks to get everything arranged. During that time, I became the most agreeable husband imaginable. When she started her usual arguments, I just nodded and agreed with whatever she said. When she demanded emotional reactions, I gave her bland acknowledgments. It was like I'd become a gray rock, completely uninteresting to her need for chaos. She actually seemed to enjoy it at first, thinking she'd finally train me to just accept her behavior. What she didn't realize was that I was using her satisfaction with my compliance to make my preparations easier. On a Friday morning, while she was at her yoga class, the movers arrived. I'd already sorted through everything, my belongings, joint possessions I was legally entitled to, and her stuff that I was leaving behind. The guys worked fast, and by noon, my life was packed into boxes and loaded onto a truck. I left her a note on the kitchen counter, next to the divorce papers I'd had served earlier that week. The note was simple. You said your drama was part of the package and I should get used to it. I'm returning the package to sender. The drama is all yours now. Then I drove to my new apartment across town and waited. She called first, around 3 p.m. when she got home from yoga. The screaming voicemail she left was epic even by her standards. Accusations, threats, demands that I come back immediately to discuss this like adults. I didn't respond. The next call came an hour later, this one tearful and pleading. She promised to change, said we could work through this, begged me to come home so we could talk. Still no response from me. By evening, the calls had turned nuclear. She was going to take everything in the divorce. She was going to destroy my reputation. She was going to make me pay for humiliating her like this. I saved every voicemail as evidence for the divorce proceedings. Update 1. The real fireworks started on Saturday morning. She'd apparently spent Friday night calling everyone in her contact list, friends, family, co-workers, spinning a story about how I'd abandoned her without warning, how I was cruel and heartless, how she was the victim of an emotionally abusive husband who'd snapped and left her homeless. Most people who knew us both saw through it immediately. Our mutual friends had witnessed her dramatic episodes at dinner parties, game nights, and social gatherings. They'd seen how she'd create scenes over nothing, how she'd turn pleasant evenings into emotional minefields. Her own sister later told me that she wasn't surprised it had come to this. But her parents? They bought her story completely. Saturday afternoon, her father called me. He was furious, demanding to know how I could abandon his daughter like this, threatening legal action, calling me every name in the book. I listened politely and then told him that if he wanted to know what really happened, he was welcome to listen to some of the voicemails his daughter had been leaving me. I offered to forward them along with the documentation I'd been keeping of her behavior patterns. He hung up on me. Sunday morning, I got a call from her mother. She was more diplomatic but equally accusatory. Her daughter was devastated, couldn't understand how I could be so cold, was barely holding herself together. Could I please at least talk to her, try to work things out like mature adults? I explained that I'd tried for 3 years to work things out. I'd tried communication, counseling suggestions, compromise, patience, and understanding. Her daughter had made it clear that her drama was non-negotiable, that it was my job to just accept it. So I had accepted it, by removing myself from the equation. Her mother asked what she was supposed to do now. Her daughter couldn't afford the mortgage on our house alone, was too distraught to work properly, and needed somewhere to stay while she figured out her life. I suggested they could help their daughter the same way they'd enabled her dramatic behavior for 30 years, by accommodating it. Update 2. Monday brought the most entertaining development yet. Around 10 a.m., while I was setting up my home office in the new apartment, I got a call from my former next-door neighbor. She was laughing so hard she could barely speak. Apparently, my ex-wife had spent Sunday evening packing suitcases and loading them into her car. Monday morning, she'd driven to her parents' house with all her bags, expecting them to take her in and support her through this traumatic abandonment. The neighbor had gotten the whole story from her mother-in-law, who was friends with my ex-wife's mother. According to the gossip chain, when my ex showed up on her parents' doorstep with suitcases and her full dramatic narrative about being victimized, her parents had initially welcomed her with open arms. But here's where it got interesting. Within 4 hours of her arrival, she'd apparently started her usual routine. She criticized how her mother arranged the guest room, complained about the food, and launched into a dramatic monologue about how everyone in her life had failed her. When her father suggested she might want to consider what role her own behavior had played in the marriage falling apart, she'd exploded. According to my neighbor's source, the scene that followed was legendary. Screaming about how her own parents were supposed to support her unconditionally, accusations that they'd never loved her properly, threats to cut them out of her life if they didn't validate her version of events completely. Her parents, who were in their 60s and had been looking forward to a peaceful retirement, suddenly found themselves living with the full force of their daughter's drama manufacturing system. And for the first time in 30 years, they didn't have a son-in-law to deflect it onto. The neighbor said her mother-in-law had overheard her parents outside their garage that evening, with her father saying he was starting to understand why I'd left the way I did. Tuesday, I got another call from her mother. The tone was completely different this time. She sounded exhausted and asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee to discuss the situation. Not to reconcile. She understood that ship had sailed, but to get some insight into how to handle their daughter's behavior. I agreed, curious to see how this would play out. We met at a neutral coffee shop Wednesday afternoon. Her mother looked like she'd aged 5 years and 4 days. She apologized for the accusations they'd made against me and admitted that living with their daughter's full-time drama had been an eye-opening experience. She described the past few days, the constant emotional crises, the way every conversation became about how wrong she'd been, the impossibility of having a peaceful moment in their house. Her father was stressed to the point of chest pains, and she herself was barely sleeping. I listened sympathetically and then shared some of the documentation I'd kept, not to be vindictive, but to help them understand what they were dealing with. The patterns of manufactured crisis, the way she'd escalate normal discussions into emotional warfare, the exhausting cycle of drama that had defined our marriage. Her mother sat in silence for a long time after I finished. Finally, she asked what they should do. They loved their daughter but couldn't live like this, especially not long-term. I suggested she might benefit from professional help, but noted that she'd have to want to change first. I also mentioned that enabling her behavior by always accommodating it had probably made things worse over the years. Update 3. Thursday brought the most satisfying call yet. My ex-wife's father contacted me, and his tone was completely different from our previous conversation. He apologized for the things he'd said and asked if I'd be willing to meet with him as well. We met that evening at a bar near his office. He looked defeated in a way I'd never seen before. He ordered a whiskey straight and told me he owed me an apology and an explanation. He said that growing up, their daughter had always been high maintenance and dramatic, but they'd thought it was normal kid behavior that she'd outgrow. When she didn't, they'd made excuses. She was sensitive, artistic, passionate. They'd learned to manage her moods by giving in to her demands, and when she'd gotten married, they'd been relieved that her drama would become someone else's primary responsibility. He admitted they'd never really seen how bad it had gotten because I'd been absorbing most of it. During family gatherings, I'd been the one managing her moods, preventing scenes, smoothing over her dramatic moments. They'd thought I was just being a good husband, not realizing I was actually protecting them from the full force of their daughter's dysfunction. Now, with her living in their house and me out of the picture, they were getting the unfiltered experience. He described scenes that were familiar to me: manufactured crises over trivial things, emotional meltdowns designed to control conversations, the exhausting unpredictability of never knowing what would set her off. He said his wife had been crying herself to sleep every night, and he was seriously considering therapy for the first time in his life just to cope with the stress of living with their own daughter. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. What had I done to survive 3 years of it? I explained my coping strategies, the gray rock method, the documentation, the way I'd learned to emotionally detach to preserve my sanity. I told him about the counseling I'd sought individually when she'd refused couples therapy, and how the therapist had helped me recognize that I wasn't responsible for managing another adult's emotional dysfunction. He listened carefully and asked if I thought their daughter could change. I told him honestly that change was possible, but only if she acknowledged that her behavior was a problem and committed to working on it. As long as she believed that her drama was justified and everyone else should just accommodate it, nothing would improve. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, he seemed relieved to finally understand what had really happened in our marriage and why I'd left the way I did. Friday morning, I got a text from my ex-wife for the first time since I'd moved out. It was surprisingly calm, asking if we could meet to discuss our divorce proceedings civilly. I was suspicious. This wasn't her usual style, but agreed to meet in my lawyer's office with both attorneys present. The meeting revealed the real reason for her sudden reasonableness. Her parents had given her an ultimatum: get professional help for her behavioral issues and start taking responsibility for her role in the marriage's failure, or find somewhere else to live. They'd also made it clear that they wouldn't be financing her lifestyle or legal battles. Suddenly faced with the reality of having to support herself without drama-enabling enablers, she was motivated to resolve the divorce quickly and move on with her life. Final update. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. She ended up keeping the house, but had to refinance to buy out my half of the equity. I got my retirement accounts, my car, and my freedom. More importantly, I got my peace. The most interesting development came 6 months after I moved out. Her mother called to update me on their daughter's progress. Under pressure from her parents' ultimatum, she'd actually started seeing a therapist who specialized in personality disorders. The diagnosis was revealing traits of histrionic and borderline personality disorder, which explained a lot about her need for constant drama and attention. She was apparently making some progress, though her mother was realistic about how difficult change would be after 30 years of ingrained patterns. They'd established boundaries in their own relationship. No more manufactured crises. No more enabling dramatic behavior and consequences for crossing those boundaries. Her father had also started therapy to deal with his own guilt about enabling their daughter's behavior for so many years. He'd realized that by always giving in to her demands to avoid scenes, they'd actually taught her that drama was an effective way to control people. As for me, I'd been dating someone new for 3 months, a woman who actually appreciated quiet evenings at home and didn't need constant emotional chaos to feel alive. When I told her about my ex-wife's declaration that her drama was part of the package, she'd laughed and said that sounded like someone trying to market a defective product. The house I'd shared with my ex-wife went up for sale 4 months after the divorce was final. Apparently, she couldn't afford the mortgage payments even with her parents' help, and living alone in a place full of memories from our failed marriage was too depressing. I drove by it once when I saw the sold sign go up. Standing on the sidewalk, looking at the windows where I'd spent so many evenings walking on eggshells, I felt nothing but relief. Someone else would fill those rooms with whatever energy they chose, hopefully something healthier than what had been there before. The best part of my new life wasn't the absence of drama. It was the presence of actual peace. Quiet evenings that stayed quiet. Conversations that didn't turn into emotional minefields. A relationship built on mutual respect rather than one person's need to create chaos. When she'd said her drama was part of the package and I needed to get used to it, she'd been absolutely right about one thing. It was definitely part of her package. But she'd been wrong about me having to accept it. Sometimes the best response to an ultimatum is to take the option the other person never thought you'd choose. I'd returned the package to sender, and everyone involved had finally gotten what they actually needed, even if it wasn't what they'd originally wanted. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us. Please subscribe.